Let's talk supply chain. So, welcome to the show, Paige.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you here. I mean, the women that I've met from SAP are incredibly talented, and you are certainly no exception. The positions you've held over the course of your career so far have been the types of roles women dream of, and you've achieved all of this whilst moving abroad as well. So, I'm really looking forward to finding out more and hearing your words of wisdom because I think there's going to be a lot for the next generation to learn from you. So, let's dive right in. How did you get into supply chain? I mean, pretty much everyone I know or I interview falls into it one way or another. So what
Yeah,
did that look like for you?
that's super interesting. So I'm the first generation child of Chinese American. Obviously, I fell into supply chain for more of a at the beginning. It's more of a practical thing, right? Because that instead of go and design shoes and go become a journalist when I was younger, that I sort of went into IT and software. So I
Mm.
actually started in the shop floor doing more of yeah, systems engineering and moving towards more of to management consulting. Then ultimately, I landed by leading a software small startup company in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was a manufacturing execution system. So I was heading up development. Then sort of merged into the acquisition, being acquired by SAP. And then
Wow.
my career kind of went from manufacturing to R&D, PLM to logistics, planning, and networks now. So it's kind of traveling the entire supply chain, I would say. But starting very concrete in the shop floor and then moving kind of up chain. It's been
Yeah,
a
I have
super fun journey.
I have a bit of a similar start to my career because I started off as reception at a logistics company. So I know what it's like to, start on that shop floor and sort of work your way into different departments and sort of see which ones work for you, which ones don't, and which ones you like to do and which ones you don't like to do. That's definitely something that I tell people to do in their careers all the time. So you started at SAP back in 2000, which is an impressive tenure, right? You've held all sorts of positions over the years, which you just mentioned. So talk us through how the industry has changed over that time. How have you changed and what have you learned along the way?
Um, I would say in the 2000s, when 2000, I actually was a part of a startup that was acquired at SAP in 2008. So it's kind of a combined career. But if I would say in the 2000s was a lot of times that was moving towards the Y2K. The remember those days
Yes.
that people were so scared about the digits.
Yep.
So that's where my I moved more from more hands-on development sort of a role into more of a strategic manufacturing, strategic consulting kind of role. Then essentially moving to driving more this entrepreneurship. We had this huge startup scene, and then the bubble burst, and it was just it's a really really interesting era. At that time, not many people talk about supply chain. It's more about how do we, how do we optimize my enterprise and how do I really introduce. I think that was the beginning of the digitization at the beginning.
Mhm.
So starting at that point, a lot of the companies are spending decades about implementing ERP by extending these very fragmented. Corporate functions and departmental function into more end-to-end that enterprise view. And I think fast forward a few years as companies started being much more focusing on customer centricity. So I would say 10 years ago we started talking about that consumer centricity, that segment of one, and that kind of demand driven supply chain. And supply chain started coming into the picture a little bit, and people started saying, hey, look, what is really supply chain? Remember, when we moved to Germany, my daughter was 8, and she was like, "Mommy, what do you do?" I said, think about that every company has a product or multiple product, and then there's us who are buying or consuming the product. And then to make that right product to the right people are using it in the end, like you and me, think about everything in the middle is the supply chain. So so then you started getting into that. And if we will look 3 years throughout the pandemic and all the disruption in the war and everything, the last years, now supply chain sexy because not a single CEO doesn't go on stage and talk about we want a resilient supply chain, yeah, right?
Yep.
So all of a sudden, that demand driven supply chain also becomes supply driven supply chain because the pandemics highlighted is that how where do I overcome the shortage of supply, but also how do I really building agility to have the fulfillment of the supply. So no
Mhm.
longer is one dimensional thing. And you see the trend of enterprise from that ERP centric, that digitalization within my enterprise to this much network economy. How do I manage my supply chain together with the companies that I do business with, right?
Right.
Because I always have to buy material to produce something, and I need to ship it somewhere. I need people to service it. I need to take care of my customers. I have financial partners that are making the not just the material flow, but also the financial flow. So you name it. There's so many intertwined pieces that is making my supply chain work. So by nature, supply chain becomes a network business, and that's why kind of also my own evolution was kind of also going inside this optimization of the enterprise to this intercompany workflow. Yeah, so that's what I see how we are kind of shifting towards that, and makes a super interesting time. I mean, supply chain itself, it's challenging, right? So it's
Yeah.
24/7. It's mission critical. So
Yeah.
it's really you need to be in it. You need to like it
Yeah.
because it's a lot
And
of
you,
work.
yeah, and you need to have the right partners, you need to have the right talent, the right people. I mean, there's so many components to it. You need to have the right suppliers and partners. So you also mentioned that you moved to Germany, and currently, right now, you're in Germany, where you've been since 2015. How did the opportunity to work in Europe come about, and what made you take the leap? And you stayed, right? So you must enjoy it. How is it different culturally to life in the U.S.?
Yeah, that it's really, really different. And then, German is such a difficult language. So I'm
Yes.
still quite dumb after 8 years. I still shout at people, sprechen Sie English bitte. But it's like I kind of fell into this when SAP acquired my little startup. And then I started traveling to Germany to do this post acquisition, merger
Okay.
acquisition. And then that's a lot about taking the portfolio and the product to make it seamlessly connected, integrated as a part of SAP, right? So you don't have these multiple products with kind of
Mm,
broken experience for the customer. So I spent a lot of time commuting and coming here, which ultimately landed me opportunity to drive China growth. So in 2012, 2013, I started helping driving China growth, giving my language background and the things. Then the company thought, hey, let's expand the supply chain practices and also core R&D into the greater China market. So I was going to Shanghai and setting up our development labs and recruiting the people and bringing them up, and then also ultimately giving them topics they can own and drive, and not just kind of a development factory, but more of
right.
something they can own and they can also excel in it. And that's what I worked on for that a couple of years, which was super tough flying from Atlanta to
Mhm.
Shanghai. You just constantly jet lagged, the 13-hour difference. So finally, when all of that is set up, um, then the company, and then then it would be a natural transition to hand over to somebody either locally or somebody in Europe that with a little bit of more time zone overlap than I would be from US. Um, and and then SAP asked me whether I would consider to come to the headquarter and taking on a global responsibility, so that I can over being in the middle of the time zone, being
Wow.
able to kind of both leading both the US and China and here. And then I took that opportunity because at the time was my daughter was 8, and we felt like was the right time also for the family to move. My husband is actually British, so we are a little bit closer to family, and this was before
Nice.
Brexit, so it made a lot of sense at that time. And coming to the EU was a breeze, right? Just come as a
Yeah.
family. So yeah, so then I came into this global role, started in manufacturing, then went to launch cloud portfolio for PLM, then started into building the logistics network from scratch. So a few things, it's always kind of shaping and driving the next thing. And then 8 years passed really quick because
Yeah,
I
I feel like
every
it
two,
does.
3 years, there's almost a new job for me to do. And then you look back and you're like, wow, that's a lot of
Wow.
time already. And why don't I speak German already? This is so that didn't
Well,
work
it
very
is
well.
it is a difficult language to learn. I was just there a year ago, and, it was nice. I really enjoyed it, loved Germany, but yeah, there was no way to pick up the language very quickly. It is
Yeah.
a bit of a difficult language.
And you also asked me about the culture side. It's a one culture thing. It's just my own observation.
Yeah.
It's different. Both, I think, the both work ethics and this commitment to the American culture in Germany, it's very similar. I would say that German is very structured. The American side it's slightly different, and then when you bring the two together, you have a little bit that spontaneousness with the structure. Kind of, if you work really well together, it could be really really cool, or you could really kind of have quite a bit of friction. And I
Right.
always see myself as that bridge to connect the
Mm.
East and the West. One thing culturally different is because I'm also a first generation American, right? I think the American culture is very friendly by default. So you can go to a party, you never feel out of place because somebody would always say, "Hey, how you doing?" and they make small talks, and you're kind of included somehow. That gives you the illusion that you are part of something. Maybe you're even not, but the people are just nice. But what do they really feel about you? You don't know. And the Germans, it's feel like the Germans they want to get to know you, but if you're
Mhm.
passing by, you're not invested to be to integrate to be part of this. Um, Germans are much more reserved, so
Mhm.
they become a lot warmer. And when they feel like, hey, she's here to stay, she's has a German
Mhm.
contract, she's not on a 2 year assignment. So I find
Right.
that to be a blessing because I did make the commitment to come. I never thought I
Mhm.
would stay this long, but it was like I was local, so I felt like
Mhm.
then people embraced my shortcoming a lot better with forgiveness that I don't speak German,
Mm.
and then I felt like that was part of the thing. Yeah, and I see others may struggle a little bit because if people feel like you're here 2 years and they didn't want to invest a lot of time and affection that you're just gonna leave, right? So it's
Yeah,
just interesting.
I I appreciate you sharing that because when we talk about a career in supply chain, or we talk about the international aspect, the travel aspect, the opportunities to be able to move to different places, we do have to keep in mind the culture that we're moving to, and what does that mean for us, and how does that look like within the company or maybe within the culture? And what do we need to do to sort of figure out our place within that culture? And so I appreciate you sharing that with us because it does make a difference. If you have a short term contract versus long term contract, depending on where you're going. And it's a really good thing to keep in mind, especially if you're ambitious in this industry and looking to move or take advantage of some of those opportunities. So, you're currently Senior Vice President, Chief Product Officer, and Global Head of SAP Business Network. Just a few responsibilities. What does that role encompass? What does a day in your life look like?
Yeah, the day in life, the fun part is the creation and the creating the purpose, the impact. The non-fun part is there's no buffer time, So I don't know that you look back your career, and then I was sometime during Christmas time and just had a little bit of downtime. And then I thought, yeah, you wake up, then I don't have a fully loaded calendar. You almost feel instantly lost because that
Oh,
became
so
who you are, right?
true.
It is crazy how you, don't have that time to think and to recenter and to relearn things and
Mhm,
furthermore, just to reflect. But I think mostly I also feel like in my role, it's a sort of a both the inspiration, vision, and strategy part, but it also the execution. So my day to day is how do I work with my team to balance that? How do I
mhm,
continue to bring that fireworks of innovation, that reimagining the SAP uh, purpose to our customers to make that impact, and but then how to actually translate that into the actual execution, and then being concrete and being also accountable. So those are the things that we do. And then of course we have a huge uh, global organization that span all these time zones. So difficult to, when you come together, when we meet face and face, and then I was like looking at my team and I go, wow, I'm so lucky. These are the incredible talents. And then they actually follow my lead, and,
mhm,
and then, but on the days when we are such a global matrix organization, I also struggle, right? How do I bring my key talent in Australia and my people in West Coast in the US and Germany onto the same call? And how do we
mhm,
really come together and talk about things and top of our minds? And that's difficult. We do
mhm.
it, but it takes a lot of commitment and sacrifice. Somebody always miss a meal, breakfast
Mhm.
or lunch or dinner, or
Right.
somebody always miss
So
some
true.
sleep. Yeah, but I
Mhm.
think that what it drives you, I would say, is that purpose. If there is a purpose to make, SAP always say, and I truly believe that we we make company run better. We improve people's lives.
Mhm.
So if you, for everything you do, if that is the impact that you're driving together with your customers and partners, and you feel that you are contributing to that purpose, then you are coming together as a whole and as a team, and that kind of the day goes by very fast. The thing is that, especially during the last year or 2 years, during the disruption time of the supply chain, and by closely working with the thought leaders and the customers in the industry, and really driving that resiliency, transparency, and this is sustainability purpose into the supply chain, is super fulfilling, because you're
Mhm.
not just randomly creating some kind of SaaS software.
Right.
You're really helping the world run, right? And
Mhm.
that should be that's something. It's really about giving to as a
Yeah.
purpose. So that to me is super
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, it's so important to have purpose. And honestly, I think it's what creates impact not only for ourselves, but as teams and then as organizations as well. What you're describing also sounds like an entrepreneur. It's kind of describes the same thing that I have in my day to day. I have a team that is all over the world, and bringing them together can be a little bit of a challenge as well. But then also being the visionary, the strategy, and then also the execution. So you're kind of an intrapreneur, right? I think that's a word where you're
Yeah.
taking on all of those responsibility as an entrepreneur, but being within a business as well. So you've said that despite all the supply chain turbulence over the past few years, that calmer waters are not ahead. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing at an industry level, but also from the perspective of SAP and your customers? How are you tackling them?
Hmm. So let's first outside in looking at the industry and the market. I think we've gone through this incredible globalization, but I also see the trend of localization. So as we move
Mhm.
into kind of different, it was starting with the Brexit and a different data residency and different regulations, like the EU now has a special regulatory things about data, and then you have certain even regions that has even more strict on the data. So I think that supply chain is becoming more regional, but yet even more global. What I mean that is that the complexity of the supply chain is no longer about finding the cheapest supply, or is about 100% outsource with the margin, but it's about how my whole supply chain and demand chain can connect and meet, and
Mm.
how I also contribute to the entire world's circularity. Because then the cost of the material is no longer just the material itself, but it's also the sustainability part of it. And
Mhm.
it's also about, who do I do business with? How do I collaborate? What do I collaborate, right? And with whom should I collaborate? And with that, where would the data reside? Who has control over what? And what insights
Mhm.
should I get? But how much do I actually participate to gain those insights? So it gets very complex,
Mhm.
and which make SAP a unique opportunity to work with the customers to drive that next gen supply chain that is network enabled. Because
Yeah.
if we think about, we are working with the world, biggest and smallest enterprise around the world, driving that individually. But the thing is, in a mirror image, your demand is my supply, and your forecast is my planning. So like
Mhm.
your sales is my purchase. Like you see the mirror effect that each enterprise somehow, if we can create that connectivity tissue, then we can have that multi-tier enterprise supply chain and demand chains kind of connect, right? And
Mm.
that's kind of the transformation. I see SAP moving towards that by orchestrating that intra-company flows to the intercompany flows. And I also see that we, as a neutral partner, we can help industry to come together to drive much more standardization, much more network effect. And if we could do that, I believe that's that true circularity can be achieved. Otherwise, you're only talking about the carbon neutral net zero. In the end,
Mhm.
if you have no knowledge beyond your 1.5 tier of your supply or demand, then how do you really achieve that net zero in the end? So I think
Yeah.
that our role changes, so that not just being a technology provider, I think we also now have a chance to together with our customers to do that big transformation. And we, as a 50-year-old company coming from this very enterprise resource planning, area. Now we also have another 50 years so we can reinvent how that enterprise planning can become that networking enterprise planning.
Mhm.
So I think it's also something of how we could evolve as a company.
Yeah, and I love that analogy. That push-pull effect is something that we don't really talk a lot about, but you're right. My sale is your purchase, et cetera, et cetera. And, I always say collaboration is the future of business. And so what can that look like? And I think we have some work to do, but I think we can definitely get there. And I think technology is going to help us with that. So what has been your experience as a woman working for 25 years in a male-dominated industry? Do you think the landscape for women has changed? Over the course of your career?
Definitely, I think so. When I first started, when I first get out of college, I think I took this system engineering job with the EDS, and literally, I show up in the customer General Motors IT department, and I was the only girl there, and I
Mm,
was the only consultant, and I was the only girl there. Today, if I look at my teams around the world, I see a lot of beautiful young women that are entering with the full passion and the wide eyes. It's definitely a lot more. And you also see, I am also super inspired as I meet our dear customers who are heading up as a chief supply chain officer or chief procurement
awesome.
officer. I see more and more women doing those roles. So I think we are much more diversified, and I think women, hopefully more women, will find the topic to be interesting because uh,
Mhm,
because if you're a problem solver, there's no other field more interesting than supply chain. It's just there are just so many challenges there that nobody has answer. That it makes this industry super challenging, but it's also
mhm.
very fulfilling, right? Because
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
never will be able to say, hey, today I go on cruise control, everything's gonna go the way exactly it should go. No, it doesn't.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And we spoke to Darcy McLaren recently. She spoke about how important both mentors and sponsors had been to her career success. What advice would you give to anyone listening that might be thinking about how to elevate female voices in the workplace, or perhaps maybe create more leadership opportunities for women?
Yeah, I always, I totally agree with Darcy, and by the way, I love her too. It's I had such a privilege that I've met so many men and women in my life who sort of shared their experiences with me,
Mhm,
mentored me, and then also some of them lead me along because I think you always need someone needs to believe in you. And I was
mhm,
like, I always joke about it, like I'm this person's protege, that person's protege. I have been many people's protege, and it's a joke, but it's actually not a joke in some ways because I think to really grow and to learn that you need someone who kind of challenge you and push you towards that, but then also
mhm,
kind of support you and open their network to you so
mhm,
you can attach to and grow to it. And I think that's really important. And I think it's not my advice, but more of my learning to all the other females, whether you are the leaders or aspire to be leaders. I think women, it's more challenging. We need to dedicated time. We need to
mhm,
find time to connect and then also to support each other. Um, it's not a gender kind of thing, but I do think women has more. We take more on ourselves as a caregiver. So usually at home, that you naturally play a lot of more closer role with your children, and then you also tend to become the caregiver for the elder parents. At
mhm,
least in my case, it's like that, and I'm the only child and also a girl. So like you naturally feel, you assume that mother and the wife role, no matter what other role you have, and then and which makes time very very challenging for us, because you don't
Mhm.
have a lot of time for yourself, just for yourself, and you definitely don't have enough network time that like the guys could go to a game and go ski as a group, or go play
Mhm.
golf as a group. Like you don't have as much of that time.
Mhm.
Perhaps we also don't create enough of those time for ourselves.
Mm.
So that's the challenge, and then we have to find, yeah, those, and then need to. I mean, everything is a choice. So I think we just have to be self-aware of that. That time is a challenging part, and then how do we find those moments? How do we build a network that
Mhm.
having that support for each other? And I
Mhm.
think, and then there's no right and wrong answer, and in the end, it's that's just
Yeah.
something you have to navigate
Mhm. I'm
through.
glad you said that. I'm actually working on something right now to bring women in supply chain together more often to network, and do all of those things that you said. So I'm very excited about what we're building and the fact that it's something that is needed in the industry. Now, you were featured in Supply Chain Digital's Top 100 Women in Supply Chain last year, and you've been a recipient of the Women in Supply Chain Award. So, congratulations. Why do you think it's important to continue to have these awards and accolades to celebrate women in the industry?
Yeah, I'm incredibly lucky and flattered, because especially if I look at all the other amazing women there, and to just be at their company is already a big honor. I think it's important to do so, not so much about the awards itself, but it's more about giving that awareness, and also giving that inspiration to the younger women out there, that they
Mhm.
actually think, that when I grow up, that could be me, right? That
Mhm.
I could be one of those. That could be a
Yeah.
choice, and that's something quite cool, because my daughter now is teenager, and then her friends, and then sometimes they talk about it, and then they joke about it, and she's like, when I get to be a middle-aged woman, I want to be a Vivi's mom. And I said, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Let's just subtract the middle age part, but I was growing up. That's so great. But I think it's something that just becomes that can be a career trajectory, that could be a path
Mhm.
that women can foresee, that, and it could
Yeah.
be fun, like if
Mhm.
it's something real, and they can think, yeah, it's a hard work, but it's fun, and
Mhm.
then hopefully more women would want to come
Yeah.
and join this field, because when men and women coming together and looking at the same problem from the challenges from different lenses, we come
Mhm.
up with such amazing perspectives, and also different solutions, which is
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah, and it's so rewarding. So what's one thing that you're most proud of in your career? Or maybe personal life, personal or professional?
Ah, that's a tough one. I would say
Mhm.
I'm never satisfied with the status quo. So I've
Love that.
always and then I never make regrets. I only
Mhm.
learn from it. I have a lot of learnings, but I never say every choice I made is my choice, and everything I did for the
Mhm.
next thing is a status quo that I wanted to go and break and challenge myself. So it's never about being somebody else. It's being me, and it's being a better version of me every day. And
Yes.
that's what I think that's something I feel good about, and I feel like I would never do it differently.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I always say, it's hard to be something that you're not, right? So always be yourself. and always look for growth and ways to be able to do that. And I love that you said be a better version of myself every single day, whether that's for yourself, for your team, whatever that looks like for you. But yeah, just being yourself and being self-aware and knowing what you like and what you don't like, and just not pretending to be something that you're not.
Yeah, and then be okay that you make mistakes because you learn from it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you take a
absolutely.
chance, you take a risk. And I
Yep.
think
And
moving to
there's
Germany was a big risk, but it's a very,
Mhm.
very well-made decision. I would do it all
Yeah.
over again.
Nice. I love that. So, last but not least, what does the future look like for Paige?
Yeah, so I don't know. It's going back to the challenge in the status quo. So it's always if I, three things that I love people. I think it's the heart and soul of everything we do. So for me, it's always in. I'm in the network business, which is a people business somewhat too. Supply chain is about building that right relationship, but we talked about a little bit earlier is how do we create purpose and then
Mhm.
creating value and impact for our customers. So those are kind of the three things. There's always a center somewhere in my mind. And then yeah, so I'm always open to the next thing. Yeah, we said to challenge the status quo, so I leave that quite open. But I think if we are always having fun together with the people and driving that purpose and impact for our customers, then it could be anything, Sarah. It could
Mhm.
be anything.
And then, I do want to ask you, what's one piece of advice, really quickly, one thing that you would have for girls and women looking to follow in your footsteps?
Believe in yourselves. Years ago, when I was hesitating of taking on responsibility or making a change, and I had a great mentor that told me one thing is she was obviously she had a lot learning at the time. She said, Paige, it's not like everybody's this, but there are some difference between men and women. When there's a job out there you wanted to apply, when the men look at the 10 qualifications, saw the first one, the line, I meet, they immediately apply. Now we're joking a little bit. The women will study all 10 and then say, wow, I kind of meet 5, 6. There's a 3, maybe 3.5. I need to improve. Let me go improve on that, and then I come back. So a
Mm.
little bit of behavior change. I would say, always have that humbleness, that self reflection and awareness in mind. But it's okay to be a little bit bullish. It's actually absolutely okay to go for it, and to go for a little stretch goal because you believe in yourself. And then if you have the right people helping you, you have that right attitude, you can make it. You don't have to go and work on it for months and years and say, now I'm ready for it. No, you are ready for it. You can do it.
Yes, you are ready for it. You can do it, Paige. It's been a real honor to have you on the show. You're so passionate about transforming supply chains with collaboration and smart technology. You really are a woman after my own heart. And your bravery and ambition as a woman in supply chain is really inspirational. I mean, moving around the US and then on to Germany, all whilst excelling in high level leadership positions, truly shows women what they are capable of and what can be achieved if you work hard, you're committed, and you really put your mind to it. And it reminds some of the male leaders out there why they really need to make space for women. So, Paige, thank you so much for joining me on our Woman in Supply Chain series, sharing yourself with us, sharing your authenticity, and really inspiring all the women out there in supply chain and the ones that are coming up. So thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And it's absolutely so fun talking to you. And thank you for having me.